Hello, everyone. Welcome to our online webinar, Inclusion of Wheelchair Sports in Society, organized by Bangladesh Wheelchair Sports Foundation. I'm Muntasir Firoz, Bangladesh Wheelchair Sports Foundation Director Management. And today we have Mark Bullock, Advisor, Inclusive Sports Development UK, and former member, International Paralympic Committee, Games Committee. Okay, Mark, how are you?
Very well, Muntasir. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's nice to be presenting into Bangladesh. I used to travel a lot, but now I'm stuck in London. So it's nice to have the opportunity.
Yeah, and what is the COVID situation over there?
I guess we're in lockdown. So since we had the first lockdown back in March, then we came out. Then we had a slightly softer lockdown in November in London. And now we're back in lockdown again. So I'm working from home, we're working through it. Not an easy situation for the whole world.
Absolutely.
Trying to look at the positives and the opportunities that it presents. Not easy. I'm working in disabled sport over here predominantly. And we're trying to provide as many opportunities as we can in different ways to keep people active.
Yeah. So we're going to start the question answer scenario. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. The question I have for you is: would you like to share your journey about? The thing is, when did you get inspired to work with inclusion sports?
Yeah, it's good. Good question. I've been involved for, I guess, 30 years maybe. I was a sports officer at the University of Nottingham and had some introduction to disability sports at the university, but not much. There wasn't much going on. And then in my first job, I shared an office with who became a friend, who was a sports development officer for people with a disability, and I was a tennis development officer, and we worked very closely together in the early 90s, working on projects mainly around tennis, and so that started me on my journey. So we did some work in local schools, started coaching some local players, and then I was contacted by a couple of wheelchair players to see if I would work with them, which I did, and that took me on a journey. So that was voluntary. Some of it was part of my job, and one of those players was Giant Mystery, who I've subsequently been to India with, and I started coaching Giant, started traveling with him, and that's how the journey started, really. Then I became national wheelchair tennis coach for the men. So I did that through from sort of 1995 through to the end of 1998. Then I stopped for a little bit in that role, and then the International Tennis Federation had a role as wheelchair tennis development officer. So I took that opportunity, and then I spent 15 years with the International Tennis Federation, first of all as development officer, and then as manager of the department. A lot of involvement, and now I run my own business all around disability and inclusive sport. Mainly here in the UK, I do some international work, and just providing opportunities mainly through tennis, but in a range of different sports as well.
Okay, Mark. Thank you, Mark. Can you tell us about your journey in the Paralympic Committee?
Yeah, through my role at the International Tennis Federation, I had very close links with the International Paralympic Committee. So for a long time, I was on the International Paralympic Committee Sports Council, representing wheelchair tennis, attending general assemblies as a delegate, and then towards the end of my time at the International Tennis Federation, I was nominated and accepted as a member of the International Paralympic Committee Paralympic Games Committee, and the role that we were looking, the time that I was there, we were exploring the criteria that enabled a sport to be part of the Paralympic program, because not all sports are on the Paralympic program, and not all disciplines within those sports are on the program. So it was sort of revisiting after a number of years what the criteria should be to get those sports selected or not for the Paralympic Games program. So, as you know, there are a number of sports. For example, amputee football is not on the Paralympic program. In a tennis context, wheelchair tennis is a Paralympic sport on the Paralympic program, but other elements of tennis are not. So that was sort of the brief and my involvement. I think I served for, I think it was probably 2 or 3 years, and then I came off when I started doing some work with some of the sports that were trying to become a Paralympic sport. So there was a conflict of interest there, because I was trying to work with one of the sports to try and encourage them or support them to try and get back on the Paralympic program.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. I think there are some games have some with disability people have boundaries, right? And sometimes we feel we should not cross those boundaries because they can get hurt or something, and that will be bad for them, right?
What do you mean, in terms of classification, or you mean getting injured?
In case of injury, in case of injury.
Yeah, I think rules and things need to be put in place to ensure and reduce the risk of injury. The International Paralympic Committee, for example, did some really good work around sledge hockey in making the sledges safer to reduce the number of injuries. And I think that side of Paralympic sport will advance as there's more studies done around injuries, that the athletes will do more around injury prevention. But we're trying to encourage as many people to take part in sport as is possible.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Since you have worked in the organizer end too, would you share with us that did you get any support from the society?
Yeah, I think it varies, and certainly I live in a country that hosted London 2012, and there's a lot of support for the Paralympic movement. London 2012 was a real game changer in terms of raising awareness of the Paralympic Games. In my role, I get a lot of support for the type of work that I'm doing. I guess the nature of what I'm doing is I will always be looking for more support, always looking for national governing bodies and sports clubs to do more. But I think in the long time that I've been involved, it's much easier. You're pushing on open doors. People are much more open to providing opportunities for disabled people to play sport. So we're on that journey. I'll always be, I guess, at the edge, pushing the boundaries to encourage people to do more, whichever part of the world that is, and try and reduce the barriers to participation, and encourage more disabled people to take up sport, and encourage society in its widest sense to improve opportunities for disabled people in sport, but also in wider life. Yeah. Sport doesn't operate in a silo, so to enable people to access sport, transport needs to be accessible, and other aspects of life need to be accessible and inclusive, so that the journey into and through sport is a little bit smoother. So yeah, lots of opportunity, lots of support, but also would always look for society to provide more opportunities for people to play and participate.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. The next question I have for you is that so you're saying that you have a lot of support from the society, right? So at present, do you face any challenge?
Yeah, there's always challenges. There's always barriers. Like I think when I reflect on my career, I've spent my whole life trying to persuade people to do a little bit more. So yeah, there are still barriers. There are attitudinal barriers in terms of providing opportunities for disabled people. There's obviously access barriers. So a lot of sports clubs, venues are not perhaps as accessible as they could be. And then there's providing the opportunities themselves. So actually programs being provided, coaches feeling confident to work with disabled people and people with a disability. So it's just I think, and there will always be those little barriers and boundaries there that we'll just keep nudging. I'd like to see many more coaches feel confident of coaching disabled people, and barriers being reduced. But as I think over time, those barriers are reducing, but in some ways there's still a lot of work to do. And that's not, as I said before, it's not just about making the sports facility and venue inclusive and accessible. It's everything around it. So is the publicity and communications accessible, so people feel like it's an activity for them? Is the transport accessible, etc.? And are people made to feel welcome when they arrive at the venue? It's a bigger picture. I think things have changed. The TV coverage is improving. If you take the sport that I'm most closely to, been major changes over the years, and wheelchair tennis is played in all 4 Grand Slams. Excuse me. And major improvements in terms of the awareness and visibility of disability sport, but of course we'd always like there to be more. So yeah, there are barriers. It's not all positive, but that's I guess why I enjoy the type of work that I do, in that you're trying to take people on a journey and encourage people to provide more opportunities.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. We'll take a comment from Mahi Ashfaq. The question is, I want to know what is the situation of inclusion of wheelchair sports in Mark Bullock's country. Thank you.
Yeah, here in the UK, wheelchair sport has quite a high profile. We have, wheelchair basketball has quite a high profile, and then wheelchair rugby. Wheelchair tennis, that I know most about, is played at Wimbledon, so that gives it a platform. It's shown on the BBC, so it's on television. So most people involved in tennis will know about wheelchair tennis and know it exists. I think we're now in a situation in this country where a lot of tennis fans will know the names of the top wheelchair tennis players. So Alfie Hewitt, Gordon Reid, Jordan Wiley, Lucy Schuker, Andrew Lapthorne are all players that are known. They train at the National Tennis Centre alongside the non-disabled players, so Joe Conter, Andy Murray. So yeah, there's pretty good visibility here, a lot of awareness. Still work to be done to encourage more people to play and take up sport. We still hear stories in this country of clubs unsure that wheelchairs will damage the courts. So there's still some things to work through and make sure that people are aware that the chairs don't damage the courts. But yeah, overall, there's a pretty good awareness of wheelchair sports, but still, more to be done. So I do some tutoring for an organisation called Wheelpower in this country. So tomorrow, in fact, I'm tutoring a course to upskill coaches, teachers, to make them more aware of wheelchair sport in its widest sense, and encourage them to get more involved.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. I have a question for you that in your society, wheelchair athletes, how much are they willing to come forward to be a wheelchair user, or how much wheelchair users are willing to come or to become wheelchair athletes?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, because I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think London 2012 raised the profile. And Wheelpower that I just mentioned, for example, do quite a lot of development activity. There's an interspinal unit games. So I think if people have an accident and become injured, there's an awareness of the opportunities that are available that perhaps wasn't around 10, 15 years ago. So that overall awareness, I think, helps, and there's much more awareness of the sports that are on offer. But again, still more work to be done to raise awareness of what the opportunities are and where people can access them. Because, for example, if they're in a spinal unit, or if they're in a hospital, that's often not close to where they're at home. So they might start to engage some activities in their rehab, but then when they go home, their opportunity is not available in the same place. So still lots to do, but yeah, and there will always be more to do, I think. But I think over here there's quite a high level of awareness of wheelchair sport. So if someone would like to take it, there are pathways to go down. But I think those pathways could always be improved, so that people find out about them earlier, after they've had their injury, or if they're in a school, for example. How do we get information to them of the opportunities that are available?
Thank you. We have another comment. Mr. Helal said Shubho Kamana, which is in English is welcome. He's giving you welcome. And another comment, Mahi Ashfaq, thank you Bangladesh Wheelchair Sports Foundation and Mr. Mark Bullock for discussing about an important topic. Thank you, Mahi Ashfaq, to you too. So Mark, how you are at organizing it, right? So when you do any event, so how does your sponsors support you guys?
Okay, good question. I'm now self-employed and work for a range of different organisations. And so the governing bodies of sport here are very supportive. So a lot of the funding comes from governing bodies. I've done a few projects myself, or been involved in projects where I've worked, not entirely on my own, but with other people. So in the COVID situation, where we've been coaching wheelchair tennis online, for example, we've gone out to local funding bodies in the UK and written bids and been able to secure funding from foundations. So that opportunity is available. Little bit of commercial sponsorship, but I think most of my work is funded by the organisations that provide opportunities for disabled people to play sport. So that might be Wheelpower, the Lawn Tennis Association, which is the governing body of tennis, in my work in visually impaired tennis. It's Metro Blind Sports and British Blind Sport who are funding the projects that we do. The participants contribute, so it's finding those different avenues. And I think perhaps we are in a different position in the UK to we were 10, 15 years ago. The fact that I'm able to run a small business around disability sport means that there's some funding available and the opportunity, whereas perhaps 20 or 30 years ago most of it would have been done on a voluntary basis. So things are changing, I think, and the opportunities are there. I wouldn't say it's easy to get funding, but there are funding opportunities available, and disabled people and opportunities for disabled people are prioritised by Sport England, for example. So there are funding opportunities out there to fund the activity that we're trying to put on. I think that answers the question, does it?
Yeah. Thank you. I'm getting you. You guys in your society have a lot of support, where in our society people hesitate a lot to support us to do things, and still we are developing day by day. People are getting more interested, and they are getting giving us support for doing our work.
Yep.
Right. So our society varies a lot in this sector.
Yeah, and I think, I used to work for the International Tennis Federation and travel a lot. My suggestion was always not to try and work with people to say that you're offering them something as well, not just asking for funding. So what can you contribute? How can you work together to achieve different objectives? And doing things like you're doing today to try and raise awareness. Now, get some publicity. Social media is a great platform that wasn't around when I first started, so it is now much easier to spread the message. And I think that we now have platforms that we didn't have before. And it's just spending a lot of time, and I would still say it happens. I'm still doing it. A lot of conversations, explaining what you're doing, and trying to bring people on a journey with you. And a lot of that is by doing a lot of communication work, having a lot of conversations, doing a lot of publicity, so that people have a greater awareness of the opportunities that are available. So, and I think I've seen some. You did some, and I'm seeing it internationally now. So you've done some work in rugby, yeah. So that's and I guess cricket. So yeah, just keep nudging away. And I think in a way there'll never be enough resource. We'll always want a little bit more. That's certainly, I feel, the nature of the work that I'm doing. Yes, there are lots of opportunities in the UK, but we'd also like there to be more. So we're always, I try to look back and say, well, we're always looking to do more, but sometimes we would reflect on the success that we've had, and look at the improvements that we've made over time, and still strive for more, but also reflect and look where we've come from.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. In a society, can wheelchair athletes be the part of can get into the organizing end? Are they willing enough to get in the organizing end?
Yes, yeah. One of the things that I feel that I'd like to see more of and encourage is disabled people coming through into decision-making positions, and that's certainly how wheelchair sports has evolved in this country. That wheelchair athletes themselves organising activity, I guess now we're going through a little bit of a phase where the governing bodies, the mainstream governing bodies, if that's the right description, are taking more responsibility. And I think the next phase will be getting more people with a disability engaged in the decision-making processes of not just wheelchair sport, but sport as a whole. So people are willing to help. One of become coaches, and therefore when new players start, they're seeing coaches like them rather than just non-disabled coaches. But yeah, there's a real willingness to support and help out and be involved. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark. Now we're gonna take a comment. Javed Ahmed said best wishes. Thank you, Javed. So Mark, you are working in this sector for a long time, right? So what is your final, you can say, goal to reach?
I think that's a really good question. I'm not quite sure what the final goal is. I guess just continuing to strive to keep improving the opportunities that are available for disabled people to play sport. So the Paralympic Games has dramatically increased in profile, which is really good. Wheelchair tennis being played in all the 4 Grand Slams is brilliant. And then at a local level, just trying to encourage more and more sports clubs to be inclusive and accessible. I think one of the barriers is people perhaps have to travel quite a long way to take part in wheelchair sports. Whereas one of the areas that I do a lot of work in is inclusive sport. So a wheelchair user in a tennis context playing against a non-disabled person. And then they don't have to travel so far to go and play another wheelchair user. They can go to their local club and play a non-disabled player. And that does happen. But I think that could happen a lot more. So I'm not sure quite what my end goal is. It's just to keep pushing, nudging the boundaries, and providing more and more opportunities for disabled people at every level. So whether that be someone that wants to compete in the Paralympic Games, or whether that's someone who would just like to play sport or take part in some physical activity for their health and well-being. And I think for me, that's a big focus. It's not all about people going on a journey of wanting to represent their country. It's also about the wheelchair user that would just like to work on their overall health and well-being and enjoy taking part in sport once a week, once a fortnight, whatever that might look like.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. So you are already making your work globalizing your work, right? So how do you work with other countries in this sector, or how do you want to associate with other countries or get them into?
It's a really good question. When I was at the International Tennis Federation, I think the parts of the job that I enjoyed the most was trying to develop the sport around the world. Focusing on the countries where there was less opportunity, less awareness. That's the part I enjoyed the most, and that's something that I would love to be able to do more of now that I'm not working for an organisation. I'm working for myself. So I think, and we've learned a lot during the pandemic about how we can spread the word and raise awareness by doing things like we're doing today online. So we're coaching wheelchair tennis online, and we have an international audience. So we've had players from all over the world join in. So I think that there are opportunities through the technology where we can, like today, we can share experiences at lower cost. So I don't have to fly to Bangladesh to do a webinar. We can do it online. It's not quite the same, but there are ways that we can share information and share resources and run workshops without actually having to travel. And I think that's how I see. When it's safe and we're able to travel, I'd love to be traveling again and visiting countries and running workshops face to face, working with players in my sport. But I think what we've learned over the last 9 months is there's actually quite a lot that we can do online, and I think that will be the future. So sessions like this where we're talking about it, but also we can run sessions where we're demonstrating wheelchair tennis to athletes from computer to computer. So I think lots of opportunities coming. It's just how we explore how those opportunities work. So I think what the future will be is if we were say to do a project in a country like Bangladesh, it would start off online. Yeah. So we would do the first few workshops online before we visited. And then we're cutting out some time and some cost, and we're getting to know people so that we maximize the time that we're in. If we were to visit a country, the theory we do online, we get to meet people online, and we get an understanding of what we need to do if we visit a country. So I think that's where, for all the bad things about the COVID pandemic, it has taught us how we can use technology to help spread the word internationally, and continue to share content even though we're working in a different world. So it'll be interesting. I mean, I hope the Paralympic Games takes place in Tokyo, and that will provide a platform again if it takes place for. At the moment, it's to go ahead. I hope it does. That will provide a platform to raise awareness, and I think it's up to us to, if we're in lockdown and we're not able to do sport in the traditional sense, it's how do we maximise that opportunity to raise awareness and share information in the situation that we're in. Maximise the opportunity that we have.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. You're most welcome to come to Bangladesh when this pandemic is over. And this pandemic has taught us to broaden our knowledge about both technologies and supported us or taught us to reach different ways to different peoples. We can advertise our campaigns. We can communicate with our athletes continuously through internet these days. So you can say that the pandemic has not only the pandemic has taken a lot of things, but it also gave some new ways to move forward, right?
Yes, yeah. I think I mean, we've been coaching online, which we hadn't done 9 months ago. We've reached a few people that we wouldn't have done because we're literally taking wheelchair sport into people's homes, so they feel comfortable taking part, and then they get to know us. So I think we've got to try and look at all the positives, and use what we can to raise awareness, reach new people, and be best prepared as we start to come back to a new normal. And it's going to take some time. So I think we work through it and be prepared for a little bumpy road. We're not quite sure how smooth it's going to be, but as we said, maximize the opportunities and doing things like we're doing now. Because I probably would be if we were in normal times, I'd be busier running around doing things, whereas at the moment I'm at home. So when Noor contacted me and said, "Could I do it?" Well, I thought, well, I'm at home, so it's very easy to give up half an hour to do something like this and really enjoy it. So I think outside of COVID, it would be more difficult to arrange a time because I wouldn't be at home as often. So it's maximising those opportunities now, and you know, in this period, you might be able to find other people like me, and I can possibly help. So you've got some other people that you can share some thoughts and ideas with, yeah, build up some relationships, so that when we do come out of the other side, you know, like there's a possibility now we've made a connection that we can do something face to face because we've made this link during the pandemic. Yeah.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you very much for doing this webinar with us and giving this lot of what I'm going to say. We have made a network, right? We have made a link, and we can work what the future comes and see what it goes, right? Where it goes.
Yeah, yeah. And if anyone's watching the webinar and they'd like to ask me any questions, I'm on Twitter and Instagram, and people are welcome to ask me questions, and we can share information, and I'll probably be asking questions back as well. So yeah, it'd be good to get the communication going. So so that collectively we can, you know, provide more opportunities for people to be active.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Do you have any message for Bangladesh?
Well, I think stay positive in this difficult situation. Enjoy it, and yeah, you know, for the athletes that are listening, make the most of the situation and keep active, and look at different ways of doing things. So if you, depending on your circumstances, if you can't get together to play the sport that you love, whatever that sport is, try and find different ways of doing it, either at home or close to home. So you keep those connections going. And I think one of the most important things at this time is we keep those connections up. And sport provides that for us normally. And now we've got to look at it in a slightly different way. And I just encourage people to be as active as they can, and just keep promoting what you're doing, and sharing the good stories, so that the awareness.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, we're trying our best to do our works here through online and other stuffs. We're at the end. We'll take some comments over here now. Nunahan gave a comment. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Mark, and sharing your journey with us. And Mr. Helal said, thank you, Mark, to share your journey. And Kistu Kujar said, thank you, Mark, to share your journey. Okay, Mark, we are at the end here of our time. Thank you very much for being with us and communicating with us and sharing your journey with our viewers and also with us too. Thank you.
No, and thank you very much. Really enjoyed it. Thanks for the opportunity, and yeah, good luck with everything.
Thank you, Mark.